Hey, we're Saints. Father Chris here. Welcome to our Crucifixional Life stream. Glad to have you beautiful people with us. We have been, or started yesterday, talking about slavery and the idea that all of us are slaves. We just might not admit it. And so we're going to spend the rest of the week and we're going to talk through St. Paul's epistle to the Romans, specifically chapter 6, verses 15 through the end, through verse 23. Now, to set the context, the epistle to the Romans was written, obviously, to the church in Rome, to the early Roman Christians, which means it was written in the context of the Roman Empire. And the way that the Roman Empire functioned was that there was the emperor, he was the Caesar, the Augustus, right? Like Octavian, Caesar Octavian, and Marcus Aurelius, all these famous emperors. They were free, right? They could run around and do whatever they want. And there were a few other people around that they might declare free, or maybe senators were free, very, very wealthy landowners, right? They would be, in some sense, free in that they were not slaves, right? They were still under the thumb or the boot of the Caesar, but they were free in the sense that they were not working as slaves. Other than that elect few, everybody else, pretty much a slave. You had to do what you were told. In some places, you lived in the master's house, right? So you were a slave, and you would either, cook the food, serve the food, heat the Roman bath, all the stuff that, gardening, or what's the word? Not gardening, but like working in the field to raise crops. I mean, you were a slave, right? And you did what you were told. And if the master didn't like you, he could beat you, or worse, chop off your head, right? I mean, these were the ways that this was the life that the Roman citizen or slave was functioning. And they were dependent on the master of their house. Now, at some point, this is an important thing to keep in mind, that at some point, a certain slave owner might be unwilling, or it's not necessary, or didn't want a certain slave anymore. And so he would take the slave to the marketplace and sell him or sell her. And so a new slave owner would pay the old slave owner $50, right? Whatever it was. And that slave was now free from the original owner. He wasn't free. He was free from the original owner and now became the slave of the new owner who purchased her. Do you understand that? So at no point are they free. They're free from the old guy, but now they become slaves of the new guy, right? And this is very important as we go through this for us to keep in mind. It's a Roman, in the Roman Empire, it's the way it functioned. But it's originally, or even before that, maybe not originally, before that, in the scriptural mind itself. In fact, if you read the Old Testament, when God comes to liberate his people from their oppressors and from sin and from all of the things that they struggled with, the Babylonians or the Egyptians or the Assyrians, he frees them from the original oppressor, but they then become his slaves. Do you see that? God does not liberate and set them free. God sets them free from the bad guys, but they become his slaves. Does that make sense? And we'll see how important this is, this understanding, both in the Old Testament mindset and in the Roman household when we read Romans chapter 6. So, that being said, let's get after it. We're going to start with verse 15. Romans 6, 15 and following. And we'll spend the rest of the week going through all the rest of it. What then? Are we to sin because we are not under law but under grace? By no means, right? Because St. Paul in the previous verses has been saying, when you sin a lot and you feel the greater trouble, that's when you feel the greater grace, right? So the idea is, hey, maybe we should just sin our brains out so we feel more grace. Paul says, no, by no means, right? So this is the context. Do you not know that if you yield yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one whom you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness. All right, so I want to spend a few minutes here and we'll see what's going on. In the context or the understanding of slavery, it is without or beyond the choice of the slave to obey or not. Either the slave obeys the master or is beaten or worse, right? So there's no real choice in it. That's the whole point, that slaves are, put under the thumb. However, when we as slaves of God or slaves of sin, we have the power to choose whom we will serve, right? It's a fascinating thing because there is no freedom in slavery. And yet here, those who hear Paul's letter, are given the opportunity to choose. And if you, who used to serve sin, But now that you've allowed yourself to come into the household of faith and to serve God, why are you going back? Don't you know that whoever you serve, whatever things you do, you are their slave? And so he says, if you serve your belly as a glutton, serve your wallet as a greedy greedmonger, whatever, lust, power, concern about other people's thoughts. If you serve those things, you're that slave. Do you understand it? You're a slave, but you are the slave of these bad things. If you choose to serve, and oh, by the way, all of that sin that you choose to serve, the outcome, the end of it, death. Not good. But if you choose to serve God and become obedient to the word and the commandments of God, the gift is righteousness. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and we're going to see this as we read the rest of the letter. So keep that in mind. Paul is saying to the people in Rome, as he writes this letter, you're a slave, as we all are. You have chosen, in this weird case, to serve sin. Don't you know that sin gives you death? Why wouldn't you just, serve God? Because the gift there is righteousness. As we'll explore tomorrow, righteousness is key. It's a key element. It's, the key element. Save it for tomorrow. All of that to be said. You and I, brothers and sisters, warrior saints, we've got those struggles as well. So how do we get free from them? How do we get free from all of the sin that we, from being a slave to sin? The short answer is we've got to become a warrior saint. Become more Christ-like, become crucifixional. We're going to keep giving you everything we can to help you do that. So if you're interested, you can always join us. Check out our website. All that good stuff is there. We love you. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to talk a little bit about righteousness and the gospel. As always, keep walking on the way of the warrior saint.